All right, folks. I wrote a blog post about this, oh gosh, a few months ago, and I finally got ready. I don't know what inspired me. I just jumped up. It's about 9 o'clock. I'm teaching summer school tomorrow, but I was like, all right, let's do this. So the question is, what is working memory? So this is something that often I kind of think I understand. I've been teaching for a while, and you hear about it, and I think, okay, yeah, I know what that is, but I can't always come up with the best definition off the top of my head. Or if I'm in a meeting or something like that, I can't always come up with accommodations right off the top of the head. So I came to a school recently, last year, and one of the students on my caseload had this area of need, working memory. So I thought it'd be a good idea to do a little research, put some things together, and present kind of a training to her teachers, because some of her teachers kind of didn't know how to work with her. They thought that maybe at times she was being lazy or she was being obstinate, things like that, kind of stubborn. And the girl just really struggled, and she always felt like she couldn't do anything. And so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to do a little training with everybody. So for myself, instead of just having those 8 teachers and the admin see the presentation, I thought I'd put it on TPT, make a blog post, and now make a YouTube video. All right, so what is working memory? So basically, memory comes in 3 ways. You got the long-term memory, short-term memory, and then working memory. But one thing that always gets me is, what is the difference between short-term memory and working memory? They kind of seem like the same thing. So my working definition is that working memory kind of retains the information and uses it while somebody's doing a task, whereas short-term memory more is just kind of like retaining the information. All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say somebody's trying to give you directions to a barbecue joint. You heard about some ribs, a little tri-tip salad. You're trying to eat healthy with a little bit of ranch and some cheddar cheese and stuff like that. And they just tell you verbally, and they also give you the address. So short-term memory is going to be like, okay, I'm just going to remember the address. I'm going to figure it out. Okay, 10th and Chestnut. Okay, I got that. That's a real barbecue joint down the way, Long Beach, California. And so that's one way. That's short-term. It's like, I got to remember the address. But the working memory is if they give you the address and then they describe how to get there, and you're trying to visualize the streets and kind of work out a little map while still trying to remember that address. And that's where students sometimes have that trouble, holding on to some information while doing something else that is relating to that information. So in a classroom setting, when you're not looking for some ribs, basically this kind of these memory techniques or these usages of memory have to do with the long term, like enduring understandings. Then you have like cramming for a test. That's kind of like that short term. And then using new information to do a task. So kind of like I'm saying, you get some new information, you got to hold on to it and do your thing. Okay, so here's an example. I'm going to try to remember these numbers. So we got 46275. Okay, so let me think about it. I'm not kind of thinking, but 46275. Okay, 46275. Okay, I got that. All right, so that's short-term memory. I just need to remember that, 46275. Okay, cool, I got that. Or it's like when you're with your friends back in the day, like way back in the day, and you had to remember somebody's phone number. You remember that? You'd be like, all right, 415. Hey, John, you got 415. 372. Mark, you got 372. All right, I'll get 7245. Okay, and then you guys have to remember it. Same type of thing, but it's only short-term memory. It's not working memory. All right, so now let me try to take those numbers again, but then do something with them. So what was it, 46275? Now let me try to add those numbers up in my head. So 4, 6, 10, 7, 17, 2, I already got confused. I want to put a 7 again, but I don't think there's a 7. Dang. Yeah, I'm looking at my numbers here. Nope. So I thought it was, there you go. So that's an example of working memory. So it's easy to be like 46275, 46275. Don't forget that. But when you have to actually utilize that information and do something with it, that's where it gets harder. And some people that have working memory deficits, that's where they find a lot of the difficulties. And this also causes a lot of confusion. Sometimes they're getting frustrated, overwhelmed, and that can come up in the classroom in a lot of ways. That can be kind of depressed affect, depressive affect, acting out, not finishing work, not starting, and sometimes it gets interpreted wrong by the teachers and sometimes the students too. They think they're just from this situation I'm thinking of, they think they're a failure and they think they can't do anything right. I've seen this with a lot of students. So that's where we kind of come in and we want to help support them with their working memory. All right, how can this be seen in the classroom? Holding on to new information while trying to connect to what you know. So you're hearing something new and then you're trying to, connect to prior knowledge, or you're like, oh, we studied this yesterday, what was that? And the teacher's talking and you're trying to remember and you're kind of having some difficulties. Following multi-step directions. This is a big one. We'll talk more about it in a minute when we talk about how to support it, but this is something I try to help support a lot because I think, a lot of us give directions, too many directions. Trying to remember the question when giving an answer. So that sounds, to me when I read, I wrote this before, but as I read this now, I'm like, wow, yeah, that's a trip, but that's something that can happen. You ask a question to the student and then they think they have an answer, but then as they're talking, they're like, wait, what was the question? You've probably seen that from time to time, but this can be more prevalent with students that have working memory deficits. Forgetting what you are doing when computer is loading slowly. So you got a task in hand, you got those multi-step directions, the teacher scaffolded, they kind of wrote some stuff on the board, said some things verbally, you're like, cool, I'm ready. And then boom, you're trying to get into your learning management system. And by the time it loads, you're like, wait, what was I supposed to do? So that's another area you might see. And then, the teacher, all they see is the student not working. And they're like, hey, what's going on? And it can become a little problematic. Note-taking, keeping what the teacher is saying in your head as you write it down. So that can be difficult for a lot of students with this area of need. And that's why we need to have different accommodations and kind of scaffold things for them. Difficulty remembering what the teacher said when they helped them. So those students sometimes you'll kind of help them and then you'll walk away and then they might raise their hand again or they just don't do it. That's kind of a thing where it could be a working memory thing. They're like, okay, I got this. Now they're trying to hold on to what you said while applying it into the task and it becomes difficult. And that's where they need some support. All right, so I think that's it. So at the end of the day, 3 kind of main takeaways I told the teachers about this student when I did this little training was those things just mentioned, they kind of lead to a student maybe just not being able to remember anything, or they feel like they can't remember anything because they're always trying to reconcile the new information with the old information and the information that's happening, here and all this other stuff. So that makes it a little bit difficult. Other times, maybe they're not working as fast as their peers. And that's where we're kind of like, oh gosh, they're not turning in work, they're not getting things done, they're not hitting deadlines. And that's where they need the support. And I think in addition to just scaffolding and accommodations, students with the working memories deficit or, whatever terminology you want to use, they need a lot of patience and understanding. And I'd say a lot of multimodal instruction, hitting them with the kinesthetic and the tactile and, the audio, the visual, and just really kind of letting them absorb things in a different way. And not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but in order to kind of just give them a chance to access everything. If everything is lectures and note-taking and they can't keep up, they're going to fall behind. But then if they have a chance to, see a visual, they can take that in and, that frees them up from having to use, the auditory processing. And, I don't know. It's just multimodal is where it is at. All right, guys. So basically, in kind of looking at the literature, talking to the school psych, looking at, a couple psych reports, these are the key things I was mentioning to the staff, and I kind of updated a little bit for my blog post and for this. So here we go. So accommodations to support students that have difficulty with working memory. So one is allow breaks. And one example is through using a break pass and kind of letting the students kind of, just come to terms and just relax a little bit if they're feeling overwhelmed. Using audio books, that's a big help, kind of, because reading is, an intensive process. So sometimes the audio, they take out the decoding and they let the student focus on the content and whatnot. Extra time on tasks. Sometimes that's difficult for teachers, but, because it just kind of messes up your grading. You're feeling like you're maybe watering down the curriculum. You're not preparing the students for the IB tests or the AP or whatever, but this is something that can help when it's used in collaboration with the learning support teacher and the student and everything. Use visuals to help with working memory. Give them, something to latch onto. Like they said, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so that kind of helps. Instead of hearing 1,000 words, they can just have an image to latch onto. Step-by-step instructions. Either writing them down step by step or just being like, okay, everybody grab your computers and then wait a second. All right, go to our learning management system, something like that. That could help a bit. Checks for understanding. This is a key one, and maybe figuring out a different way to do it with the student and kind of being like, okay, let's give me a cue if you're struggling with understanding what we're doing, and I'll come by and check, or maybe you just check after every little lecture. Whatever works out. Use of calculator or multiplication chart. This can be a big help, so students don't get wrapped up. And it's kind of like decoding. It's like, do you want the kid to decode, or do you want them to get the content? Do you want them to solve this system of equations, or do you want them to use their math facts? You know what I mean? So you don't want them to get bogged down with stuff. Up to 25% extra time on tests, like the IB exams. And then this might relate, we were at an IB school when I did this training, so that's why I'm mentioning that. But basically, kind of depending on what you have, like if you have college board exams you're thinking about, like AP stuff, SATs, the IGCSEs, GCSEs, stuff like that, you just got to look at what your student can qualify for and then maybe get them ready for that. Either give them more now and then kind of get them transition towards, doing it the other way. And one of the key things I would say is that through the scaffolding and through the accommodations and all the things you're doing to support the students, I think one key thing is that you're helping to free up their cognitive load and letting them focus on that skill or that standard or learning objective at hand. That's kind of one of the key things that I kind of focus on when working with a student that has difficulties in this area. And I think another thing that I've seen over the years is learned helplessness. And so in addition to scaffolding and accommodations, I find that like building the agency and the self-determination with the students through kind of getting them away from the learned helplessness can help out a lot. That's why I have the students take ownership of their present levels of performance, so they know where they're at. They help write the IEPs. They kind of know their strengths, areas of need. I'm talking like upper school, like from 6th grade to 8th grade, you're kind of going up, more agency, more ownership. And then high school is like the kids know everything, basically, usually, depending on where you're at. So yeah, those are two key things. And in addition to those, I would say using a strength-based approach. I know it's sounding a little cliche. I don't want to sound like I'm in a job interview or something like that. But honestly, the student might have a lot of difficulties in the day-to-day, but using those strengths. Like if the student is highly verbal, they should be using speech to text so they don't have to get bogged down in the mechanics of writing and spell checking and all that. It's like, boom, get that out the way, speech to text. And train them how, show them how, get that accommodation, get the teachers on board. That's kind of an example. And that's basically it. I wonder how I look saying that. That seems strange. But anyways, so just a couple final key thoughts. I would say, kind of like I said before, you can't get angry or frustrated with the students that might have this difficulty, right? we got to be empathetic and say, okay, how much of it is the disability, how much of it is, a student's learned helplessness, and then we got to work with them to hit that up. And then, a key thing is we're helping these kids with their IEP goals too. Not all the time in the content area class, but maybe you have short-term goals in your class and you want to help the students with that. And so it's like, boom, we're using accommodations, scaffolds, and we're going to help them reach that goal in your class, whether it be, taking notes, maybe doing research. Maybe all the different aspects of research during a class period is really tough for the kid. So you're saying, hey, the first goal is to annotate. We want to focus on annotating. You don't have to get it into graphic organizer. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to do anything. Just annotate. And short-term goals, stuff like that. And another thing is that sometimes I've seen students that have difficulty with working memory, and they think they have dyslexia or ADHD or, just feel like they can't do anything right. And I think it's up to us to figure out what their strengths are, give them accommodations, and just see what we can do, and kind of consider that it could be those things, it could be working memory, or it could be any number of other things. So basically, for me, I'm thinking the goal is to get them to self-advocate, take ownership of their learning. And I would say next time you have a student that looks distracted, or they're off task, or they get easily frustrated, or they're not getting their work in, maybe consider that it's a working memory deficit or it's challenge, and talk to a learning support teacher, if you're a learning support teacher, kind of look at their IEP, look at the psych, and just figure out what things we could do, or hit Google, because Google has some answers. Not all the time, though, if you guys notice. Sometimes, have you guys ever noticed Google is like, if you walked up to Google, all right, so if Google was a person and you walked up to that person and asked them the question that you asked Google, and they gave you some of Google's responses, you would think that they were just out of their mind, right? You guys, you know what I'm talking about? Like I'll be looking for something. What was I looking for the other day? I was looking for, oh my goodness, I can't even remember. But basically, it'll give you the opposite. And it'll be like, oh, you want to find out something in Amsterdam? Well, here is a sale in Long Beach. And, I guess they're using all your data and, this and that. But it's crazy. Be careful, guys. Use quotations. Use those Boolean searches. And you'll find some good answers. Holla.